Hello, this is Farm Future News from Terra Agric, and this is episode 10, and we welcome you to this new episode. Today's subject is cattle rearing, and more specifically, feedlot management. Many in Africa have good experience and bad experience with cattle rearing. The traditional way of rearing cattle is by the nomadic people who bring their cows from the Sahara area all the way down to the coastlines where most the, of the people are living. And so the consumers are more in the south, where the breeding takes place more in the north. Some of these nomadic people have a traditional way of bringing the cows based on ages old tracks and have to cross modern farms where local farmers are producing maize, soya, beans, or other crops. With the result that this nomadic behavior of bringing cattle from the north to the south disturbs many local communities and brings a lot of civil unrest. It's this that is uh, one of the reasons why I like to talk with you about cattle rearing, and more specifically on feedlot management. Feedlot management is a way of rearing cattle to purchase them in the north and then bring them as a calf to the south, fed them for about 7 to 12 months, and then sell them on a slaughtered weight of 400 kilo. And this is a different approach, but it needs also different inputs. Instead of that, the cattle is eating your crop, you grow the crop that the cattle is eating. Instead of that, nomadic people are managing those animals, you are going to manage those animals. And in some regions, you have to overcome prejudice, prejudice to manage cows. And I encourage you to overcome those prejudices and be realistic in the opportunity of rearing cattle. I'll show you a few videos. First of all, I like to show you a video of Kenya.
Dr. James Gakuo Mwangi is passionate about beef cattle farming. He and his business partners are pioneers of the use of feedlots in Nyeri County. Their facility is located in Chaka location. Feedlots are an alternative to cattle ranching and pastoral methods.
We are talking about applying a system where we do not really depend on the climate or the weather, because the feed that we supply here in the feedlot is manufactured feeds. We manufacture the feed, and then we get the cattle here, we feed them here, the condition here, they fatten here.
To stock, they buy weak animals, especially from pastoralists.
We are coming in is interveners in the beef industry, because the beef industry in our country today is not being managed in the right way. We got only one production level, which is in the rangelands and which is being done by the pastoralists or the pastoral farmers. And those farmers are basically at the mercy of climate and weather. These animals weaken in the rangelands, and in extreme cases, these animals, they die.
And just to demonstrate what happens, this animal came here looking like this, and you won't believe how it looks 3 months later.
Luckily, I'm a vet by profession, and then we normally have to carry out the normal disease management practices that have to be done. You can be able to keep 300 animals in 1 acre.
It takes about 3 months to purchase, fatten and sell the animals, meaning in 1 year one can fatten about 1,200 cattle on 1 acre.
You need to build the paddocks like the one you see around here. You need to have the feeding area that you can accommodate all the animals, and you need adequate water.
This can also help curb theft and cattle rustling.
Basically, it can be done. It can be done in every county. It can be done in Isiolo, it can be done in Marsabit, it can be done in Lodwar. We just need to come up and set up feedlots, and we will be solving a lot of problems that we have in the country, even the conflicts that we have there, where people have to fight for diminishing resources.
Dr. Gakuo is among the Kenyan veterinary doctors who have worked in Botswana before. He has brought back home the experience he gained from the south.
The larger part of the country, because it's somehow arid, semi-arid, they do intensive beef production. So we have been in that intensive beef production in ranches, in farms, and in feedlots.
Research shows that cattle are the most important source of red meat, accounting for 77% of Kenya's ruminant takeoff for slaughter. Approximately 80 to 90% of the red meat consumed in Kenya comes from livestock that are raised by pastoralists, with the remainder coming from highland cattle. Statistics further show that while Kenyan herders account for the majority of Kenya's meat supply, a significant portion, that is 20 to 25%, comes from livestock raised in neighboring countries with significant livestock populations. These countries include Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Uganda, making Kenya a meat deficit country.
This is Kenya, but across Africa, you see the same opportunities, but also the same threats. I'd like to show you also an instruction movie from the United States about feedlot.
Hello, I'm Dan Loy, Extension Beef Specialist and Director of the Iowa Beef Center. This presentation is part of a series of videos designed to help producers make decisions about feedlot facilities, whether they're expanding or developing new facilities. As part of this series, we've also developed the publication called the Beef Feedlot Systems Manual and a companion spreadsheet decision tool that's used to help individuals customize information related to their decision making. In this presentation, we're going to review the research that's been conducted and summarized on comparison of performance of cattle by facility type. When we look at feedlot facilities, ultimately our goal is to improve cattle comfort and their performance. We want to reduce the stresses that can occur from cold stress, heat stress, and mud, which can be quite severe depending on the severity and the length of the impact of those particular effects. However, when we're making long-term decisions about facilities, we need to look at the long-term impacts on cattle performance, health, and comfort. Ultimately, our goal is to provide a predictable environment so that we can make good decisions about cattle purchases, about break-evens, and project our expected margins in a predictable way. As mentioned before, the information that's provided here and the research that's summarized was our basis for the assumptions that went into the economic comparisons that you will find in our Beef Systems Manual that's available from the ISU Extension store. Just very briefly, our comparison included an open dirt lot or open earth lot with windbreak, the open lot with shelter, the open concrete lot with shelter, the confinement solid floor deep bedded housing facility, and the confinement slatted floor facility with rubber mats. We think rubber mats are beneficial from the standpoint of both cattle performance and animal welfare. The hoop, monoslope, and gable roof confinements are not separated in the research or within the comparisons made in the Beef Systems Manual. Just very quickly, in the next few slides we go through will show a schematic followed by a photo of each of these different types of facilities. So this is the open lot with shelter. You notice the buildings and containment is included for settling basin and the environmental containment that would be required. The photo of the open lot with shelter, this actually is from our Armstrong Research Farm in southwest Iowa, which I will show you a study that compares this to the hoop building in the background. The concrete lot with shelter, this is the schematic, an example of the concrete lot with shelter in a photo. This is the three versions of our solid floor confinement that we see across the state of Iowa, the hoop, the single wide monoslope, and the double wide monoslope. Photo of cattle in the solid floor confinement. Notice the bedding pack that have been provided for these cattle. This is a schematic of the slatted floor confinement where manure is handled as a liquid manure. Storage is below the slats in the building. And this is a photo of a slatted floor confinement with rubber mats just after the cattle have been removed for market. I know this slide has a lot of numbers on it, but bear with me and we'll explain what is on this slide. This is a summary of research by facility types comparing confinement versus open lots without shelter. This includes research that was done back in the 1970s, early 1980s, where there were feedlot facilities at the Ali Farm in northwest Iowa and the Morris Research Facility in southwest Minnesota, facilities dedicated to the comparison of different types of housing systems for feedlot cattle. The Nebraska and Missouri studies were conducted over the same time frame at commercial feedlots in those two respective states. If you look at these comparisons in the historical data, you notice that there is a consistent reduction in feed intake due to the confined housing and also a consistent improvement in feed conversion from 1 to 5 to 6% in those particular studies. The Iowa State closeout summaries were conducted from 1987 to 1997. That was from closeouts from cattle feeders that were on our feedlot monitoring program at the time. And also during that time, we saw a consistent reduction in feed intake due to confinement and an improvement in feed conversion. However, in the more modern comparisons that we will talk about in a little bit more detail shortly, there were no reductions in feed intake. We think that through improvements such as improved ventilation, improved pen density, and also the incorporation of rubber mats into the slatted floor confinement, we have reduced the impact that these confined systems have on feed intake. We do still continue to see a consistent improvement in feed conversion when we compare the confinement facilities versus the open lot without shelter. When we compare just shelter versus no shelter in open lots, in the historical research, we see consistent improvement from 5 to 9% in feed efficiency, and we continue to see an improvement in feed efficiency 3 to 5% in the more recent data as well. This includes that Iowa State closeout summary and also includes a more recent South Dakota comparison that was summarized in 2013. So let's look in a little bit more depth at some of the more modern comparisons that have been conducted. In our Iowa State University Armstrong Research Farm, we conducted a 3-year comparison comparing the hoop building that you see in the upper left, a 3-pen facility, to our open lot with shelter facility in the lower right. And we see the inside photo of that particular facility. And there are 4 pens located in that facility that each house from 30 to 40 head per pen. Over that 3-year period, when we compare the hoop structure, deep bedded housing, to the open lot with shelter, we saw no differences in cattle performance performance, average daily gain, feed conversion. We did see a slight increase in mud score, which did translate to a slight improved dressing percentage for cattle in the hoop building compared to the open lot with shelter. Again, in both cases, cattle had access to shelter, and we think that's a key component when we look at long-term effects in terms of performance in cattle in our environment. The other more recent study that has been conducted was conducted at the South Dakota State University Opportunities Farm. In this case, they compared open lot with shelter in the facility that you see in the top. In this case, it was a monoslope construction for their shelter. An open lot with no shelter. However, you see there's a nice windbreak due to the buildings and the trees to the north of this facility. And their third comparison was the monoslope deep bedded housing facility that you see in the bottom of these three photos. Over a 7-year period at South Dakota State University, they summarized information on 6,615 cattle, and over that time period they found that the shelter improved performance, both daily gain and feed conversion year-round, whether it was included as part of the monoslope or part of the partial confinement or the open lot with shelter facility. Between the two facilities, which would be similar to the comparison that was conducted at Iowa State University, no difference in daily gain, dry matter intake, or feed conversion. Again, showing that the shelter is a key component to improved performance. Another more recent comparison was a summary that was published recently in 2012 by Jeff Pasteur. This was a summary of almost 1,000 pens of cattle that were closed out from 2007 to 2009 by Land O'Lakes Purina Consultants. This was part of a creative component for Mr. Pasteur's Master of Agriculture degree. And you see in this comparison of a large numbers of cattle, either deep bedded or open lot with no shelter, again an improved average daily gain of about 4.5% and an improved feed conversion of about 6.3% due to the housing. So based on these research results in our Beef Feedlot Systems Manual, the assumptions that we used for performance are shown in this particular table. Now you can argue about whether this relates exactly to your particular example, but we think the comparisons of the different types of facilities are grounded in research. And basically the assumptions we made was that feed efficiency was improved about 5% due to shelter, whether the shelter was a confinement or a shelter that was included in an open lot. And those were the assumptions that were included. So overall, just to summarize very quickly, we know that short versus long-term performance effects of housing can differ substantially. But from a longer-term standpoint, we need to consider the effects over long-term research on performance of cattle in different types of housing facilities. There are other factors to be included other than just cattle performance, and those include labor due to the different housing systems and system types, bedding and operating costs, and of course the manure value can have a huge impact on the economic results of these particular systems. I hope this information has been helpful, and if you have more information, feel free to contact us at the Iowa Beef Center. Thank you.
This research is very good also for the good farm practices in West Africa. The conclusion is that sheltered feedlots have a better feed conversion and a better management result overall. Beside that, it's a far better process for harvesting manure and creating a fertilizer for your crops by a sheltered and a floored feedlot so that you can harvest the dung on a regular basis and separate the urine from the organic stuff material. It's important to calculate what is best for you. But if you go into cattle rearing with a feedlot, you have a lot of questions to answer. Terra Agric is welcome you with all the questions you have. Thank you very much I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and if you do so, please push the like button and subscribe for this channel. Thank you and see you next week.